Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone, and today I've got one question for every single NBA team going into the 2026 season. And these questions go across basically everything you can imagine. Whether it's, is your defense good enough? Is this the year they finally get over the hump? What players are going to break out for this squad littered with injuries, etc., etc. As usual, we're going alphabetically: Atlanta Hawks to Washington Wizards. There will be timestamps if you want to find your favorite team. And let me know down below in the comments what you think the answer is to the question I have for your squad, or another one that you have for your team going into the season. Leave a like, subscribe if you enjoy. Let's get into the list. For the Atlanta Hawks, my question is this Trey's last season with the team? I personally am optimistic about the Hawks. I think they're going to be pretty good. They're going to have a shot at a top 4 seed. If things really break their way, they could be conference finals bound for the second time in the Trey era. I'm optimistic, and I don't think Trey is going to be gone after this season, but he hasn't extended with the team. He's got a player option next summer, which I imagine he would decline. I was watching Zach Lowe's podcast a few days ago, and he talked about how, Trey Young, there have been some rumors surrounding him from what he's heard in league circles about maybe the Hawks and he's still not being on the same page, and cryptic Instagram stories, I believe, from Trey, there's no contract extension in place. I don't know. I'm not saying he's going to leave. If I had to guess, he's still going to be here beyond the season, especially if they perform. But if the Hawks somewhat struggle and suddenly he's asking for more money than Atlanta wants to pay him, maybe there's a world where he gets dealt at the deadline or just leaves in free agency this upcoming summer to a squad that is more willing to pay the star point guard. For the Celtics, my question is, who is going to survive this season? They are in the ultimate state of basketball flux right now, with Jason Tatum being out and dealing away Kristaps and Drew Holiday to clear up money. I've got no idea what next year's roster is going to look like. Jaylen Brown, Derek White, I feel pretty certain they will be on the team next season. But beyond them, I expect Peyton Pritchard to still be around, but is there a world where he isn't? Sam Hauser, kind of a similar thing. Anthony Simons, I don't think he's going to be around, but maybe he shocks everybody, plays really well, and Boston pays him. Who's going to be their starting center next season? I doubt it's going to be one of Neemias Queta or Luka Garza. So the question is, who does it become? Do they trade for somebody? Does Amari Williams step up? I've got no idea what the Celtics supporting cast around Tatum, Brown, and Derek White is going to be next season, and that's really fun. I'm excited to see what this weird team looks like, kind of how they operate throughout this season around the deadline and going into next summer, because if we know Brad Stevens, he's going to wheel and deal, and this team could look very different going into next year. For the Brooklyn Nets, my question is, who is part of the core going forward? Because right now they're still in the figured out stages of the rebuild. They just drafted 3 presumable point guards or ball handlers with Yegor Demon and Nolan Traore, and you've got Ben Serif. So who's going to be your playmaker of the future? Cam Thomas, with his current contract dispute, feels like his future with the team is up in the air. Michael Porter Jr. comes in now after you trade away Cam Johnson. Is he just here for a couple of seasons, or is he an actually long-term piece of your team? Nick Claxton's been in rumors. You've still got Zaire Williams and Noah Clowney, and Terrence Mann is here. Who is part of your core? Who is going to be your main group of guys that lead you into this next era? That, I think, is a big part of what the season is going to be all about. For the Hornets, my question is LaMelo Ball the guy? And don't get me wrong, I love LaMelo Ball. I think he's hyper talented, but I'm starting to wonder if maybe the Hornets are going to lean into a pivot at some point. Not because he's a bad player, but mainly because LaMelo can't stay on the court. He has been so injury prone to the point where it's prevented the Hornets from really figuring out what they have with this young group. And I think they've got a chance to take a bit of a jump this season. I like the direction they're going. I think they're talented, but none of it matters if LaMelo can't constantly be out there and be the productive number 1 that they drafted him and have been asking for him to be. And I think if we see another year where LaMelo is dealing with injuries and can't be out there and they disappoint, then there is a real world where LaMelo Ball trade rumors start to heat up, and some teams hey, we'll take a shot on him, but maybe Charlotte says we'll pivot a little bit to a different guy. Maybe I'm reading into it too much and that they're going to be more patient with him, but I don't know. It feels like after 5 years or whatever where he really can't be out there, at some point the Hornets might start to consider going in another direction. And speaking of that, for the Chicago Bulls, my question is, what is the direction? What are they trying to do? Because right now, the current news around them is that they're having a contract dispute with Josh Giddey. They're trying to decide how much do we pay him. that is a whole separate topic, but at least if you pay him, that's a young player you're retaining, and you've got him and Kobe White and Modest Buzelis, I think is really fun. They drafted Noah Senge, who feels like a bit more of a project piece, so it seems like, okay, they're trying to take their time, but why is Nikola Vucevic still on this roster? Why is he still here? And, I feel like you could probably move off of a Kevin Huerter and a Zach Collins. I don't know. They just continue to try to play this middle ground without really having a player that I feel good about being their guy of the future, the one to lead them back to true relevancy. And until they are willing to just go ahead and say, hey, we're going to lose the season and get some lottery luck or at least try for it, I don't think they're really going anywhere. For the Cleveland Cavaliers, the question is, can they get over the hump? I made a TikTok a couple of days ago where I said that I feel like people are way too low on the Cavs. They're my favorite in the Eastern Conference. And a lot of people replied, they haven't shown me they can win in the playoffs, so I don't believe in them yet. And I don't match that sentiment, but it is true that this Cavs team has not been able to get over the hump. Now, a lot of that has been injuries, whether to Darius Garland or Evan Mobley or DeAndre Hunter. Basically, everybody's been injured for them on a different playoff run over the last few years. But if that continues to be a problem, then maybe you need to address it with a trade. Maybe if Garland isn't able to stay healthy again, as much as I love his game, I think he's super underrated. Do you try and go for somebody a little bit healthier that maybe is a bit of a better fit? If they disappoint this year, could Jarrett Allen get moved out? Right now, the Eastern Conference is as open as it's going to get. There is no Indiana Pacers. There are no Boston Celtics. Those are the two teams that have beat you the past couple of years. Last season, you won over 60 games. This is the year that if the Cavs want to prove me right and show that, hey, they're true contenders, they're capable of winning the East and winning it all, now's the time to go ahead and do it. For the Mavericks, my question is, how does this offense work? Because people keep talking about how good this team can be, and I agree. Defensively and on the glass, they're going to be monsters, but I really don't know how this offense looks very good on a night-to-night basis. D'Lo is not really the playmaker that you want, the guy that you want running the offense. I know Cooper Flagg is going to get some point forward touches, and I think he'll be fine in that role, but he's an 18-year-old rookie. If you're asking him to run your whole offense, I think you're in a tough spot. Like, AD is great, but he's not really a, tween, hezzy dribble, go get you a bucket type of guy. Kyrie would boost this offense up a lot, but of course he's going to miss a majority of next season. You don't have a lot of shooting with PJ Washington having a pretty up year last year, but he's been pretty down as a shooter over the last few years of his career, and he's mainly a guy who's supposed to spot up in the corner and get set up, but you don't have Luka or Kyrie anymore to do that. Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford aren't shooters. Neither is Najee Marshall. I just don't know how I feel about this team offensively. Again, I think the defense and the rebounding is going to be sick, but offensively, I think there are big question marks surrounding them, and a trade might even be needed to address still, I think, a lack of shooting and playmaking. For the Denver Nuggets, my question is, are the new additions enough? They lost in the second round in 7 games the past 2 seasons since they've won the championship. It felt like going into the summer, they really needed to address the lack of depth, bring in real legitimate pieces, and they did that. They swapped MPJ out for Cam Johnson. To me, feels like an upgrade. They bring in Bruce Brown and Tim Hardaway Jr. and Jonas Valanciunas, and you get De'Ron Holmes back from injury. I think almost everybody would tell you the Nuggets were one of the biggest winners of the summer. The question is that going to be enough to finally put them back over the hump to winning a championship in this Western Conference that is really deep, really talented, and headlined by, alongside them, 2 other really good juggernaut type teams in the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Houston Rockets. For the Detroit Pistons, my question is Jaden Ivey capable of being a number 2? One of the biggest problems for the Pistons last year is not having a lot of consistent contributors outside of Cade Cunningham, who was an all-star, he was all-NBA, and I think proved pretty much everybody that doubted him wrong last season. But they're going to need somebody to be the number 2 on that roster, and Jaden Ivey is supposed to be that guy. I mean, he was playing pretty much like it last season before he went down with injury. He was being way more efficient. It felt like he and Cade were really figuring out that 2-guard dynamic, and now he's got to come back into the fold and try and again be that player to elevate them a little bit, with them losing Malik Beasley and losing the guard play of a Dennis Schroeder this offseason. They did bring in Duncan Robinson and Karis LeVert, but those are a bit different archetypes. I think Ivy is now more important than ever, trying to maintain what the Pistons did last season in this Eastern Conference, and of course long term, if they want to eventually become more than just like a frisky, maybe we can win a series playoff team and actually be a championship contender, Ivy really needs to pan out, or they need to move off of him in favor of someone that will be able to play that role. So this, obviously, massive season for Jaden Ivey. For the Golden State Warriors, my question is there enough support for Steph Curry? It feels like the question we've been asking forever over the last few years, really ever since they won the title in 2022, especially last season, and they addressed that by trading for Jimmy Butler. but it felt like there was still work to be done this offseason, and they've done nothing. They've not signed a single player. A lot of that is probably because the Jonathan Kuminga situation is still up in the air. We have no idea what's going on with that at the moment. Al Horford, they've been rumored to have interest in him, and bringing back D'Anthony Melton, who was pretty good for them at points last time he was there. Like there are moves that feel like they're on the table. They could still do stuff. The summer isn't over, but even if they add those pieces, is it still enough? Because, Jonathan Kuminga hasn't been super effective if he's back with the group of guys that they want to have out there, and Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green. And Jimmy offensively last season definitely took some steps back, and he's getting close to 40 years old. I don't know how much I'm anticipating on a night-to-night basis out of Jimmy Butler. Draymond Green isn't this elite offensive option. Pods was really up and down, was better towards the end of the season, but struggled in the playoffs. So if they want to make a run, is he going to be ready? It still feels like they're in this a little bit of a two timelines type thing. It feels like they had to bring in more surefire veteran offensive pieces to support Steph Curry. And I'm worried that, again, we're going to see next season a little bit less so because Jimmy is there, but a little bit more of, Steph Curry being like, hey, I've got 35 points and we're losing. Can anybody help me? For the Rockets, my question is, did they do enough to boost up the offense? Obviously, adding Kevin Durant is going to do a lot for this team. And in my opinion, having him on the roster now transforms them into a legitimate championship contender alongside that elite defense. But I still do worry a little bit about how they're going to produce, because obviously KD, is the guy that can go get you a bucket. Dorian Finney-Smith as a knockdown outside shooter. They've got great rebounding. You could get jumps from like Amin on that end, and Alperen Şengün and Jabari Smith and Tari Easton. Like if the young guys all pop, then they're going to have plenty to make this thing work alongside that defense. But there is a world where some of the development stagnates a little bit. They still don't have enough shooting, and that they run into continuous half-court offense issues in the playoffs like we saw last year, albeit to a lesser extent. And in this Western Conference with teams as good as like OKC and Denver, and you get a little bit more down to like the Clippers and the Wolves, like it is a loaded conference. I could still see a world where against some of these top tier defenses, the Rockets struggle a little bit. For the Indiana Pacers, the obvious question is, who breaks out in Tyrese's absence? Losing him for all of this season sucks. It really sucks. And that goes along with losing Miles Turner to the Milwaukee Bucks in free agency. So now the Pacers have a lot of scoring and ball handling that needs to be accounted for. And it seems to be that Andrew Nembhard would likely take on a lot of that. I mean, he's one of my top picks for most improved player. I think he's going to have an awesome season. I could see Benedict Mathurin picking up the slack a little bit, but also with the big man spot, I mean, it's going to be, Jay Huff, who they brought in. I feel like he has a chance to really break out and solidify a role for them going forward, or Isaiah Jackson, or even James Wiseman. Maybe this is the moment he's really been looking for to go ahead and find a role in the NBA. There are so many players across the board that could really establish themselves for the Pacers going into 2027 this season, and I'm really excited to see who does that. For the Clippers, my question is, can they beat Father Time? This is one of the oldest rosters that's ever been assembled. I saw someone at Yahoo said that it was the oldest roster ever. I didn't fact check that myself, but it's old. Like, you talk about the youngest rotation player that's probably going to be playing daily being John Collins, who's 27 years old. That's ridiculous. Harden, Kawhi in mid-30s. Brook Lopez is almost 40 years old. Nick Batum is like almost 40. It is an old team. I don't think anybody needs me to tell them that. But on paper, it's also a really talented team. Like, they have a lot of guys that can do things on both ends of the court. They improved off of last year, where they were already one of the better teams in the Western Conference. They almost won a playoff series despite Kawhi Leonard missing a majority of the season. It feels like this is a team that could get a top 4 seed in the Western Conference, that could compete with almost anybody out West. But you have to imagine that they face some regression in some way to potentially multiple guys on this roster just because of age. If there's any team that wants to show that Father Time is beatable, it's this Clippers squad. For the Lakers, I think the obvious question is this LeBron's last season with the Lakers, or even his last season in the NBA as a whole? I don't think it's impossible that he retires at the end of this season, although I do think he would announce that before the year. So the fact that we haven't heard that makes me think he's probably going to play at least one more year after this. But when it comes to the Lakers, I really don't know, because there was, him accepting his player option, and the fact that he's going to be a free agent this upcoming summer, and that they're prioritizing Luka Doncic and his timeline, that they want to save money. It feels like both sides, LeBron and the Lakers, are heading for a divorce. But I also can't really picture where else he's going to play to end his career unless he's willing to take a big time pay cut. So I don't know. Both these things feel possible, but also not likely, but also kind of likely on the Lakers side. I don't know. I don't know what's happening. For the Grizzlies, my question is, how do they get back into the upper echelon of the Western Conference? Because last season, they were one of the top seeds, and then they really fell off at the end of the year, got the 8th spot, lost to the Thunder in a sweep. They traded away Desmond Bane, so they're shaking things up, and now I don't really know where to put this team when I take a look at the standings. It feels like they have a shot to be a playoff team, but if they're outside of the playoffs this season, I'm not really surprised. Is Ja ever going to have a fully healthy season? Are he and Jaren a good enough top two to compete in this Western Conference? They're relying on a lot of really young talent to take steps forward. I don't think it's a bad roster, but I don't think it's a great one either. So what do they do? Is it making moves? Is it just hoping young guys take jumps? Is it restarting from scratch at some point? I don't know what the Grizzlies have to do, but the Western Conference has just passed them by, it feels like. After a few years ago, they seem to be the brightest and best upcoming team out west. For the Miami Heat, my question is, what's the next move? And that's kind of been the state of flux they've been in for a little while now, whether it was, what do they do to help Jimmy Butler out? And then when do they trade Jimmy Butler? What does that trade look like? They did bring in Norman Powell this offseason, and I think he, Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, Andrew Wiggins, and some of the pieces they have around them, it's not a terrible team by any means, but it's not going to be very good. They could be an 8 seed, a 7 seed. Spo is a great coach, but what's the next move? What do they do to get this team to the next level? Who do they trade for? Do they restart at some point? If they are really disappointing this season, will they consider trading Hero and or Bam to go ahead and reset? Because that's not really Pat Riley or the Heat style. I don't know. I feel like the Heat are just in permanent basketball purgatory at the moment until I see something change. For the Milwaukee Bucks, obvious question, can they keep Giannis Antetokounmpo? It doesn't feel like he's going to be traded this summer, so it seems like he'll start next season as a Buck. But are they able to show enough to keep him beyond that? Because I don't think the supporting cast around him is very good. I think Miles Turner's a good player. And then I think there's some decent role players, but it feels like if they're going to win games on a nightly basis, it's just going to have to be a Giannis carry show at the highest level. And he's capable of doing some insane stuff. And again, it's not the strongest Eastern Conference. I think they'll be a playoff team. But is that going to be enough for Giannis? Because I don't think this team is anywhere near a legitimate championship contender. And they don't really have any of the assets to go ahead and make that happen. They don't have salary cap flexibility because they waive and stretch Dame's contract. I still think a Giannis trade is ultimately inevitable if he cares about winning, because I don't see the Bucks getting back to that point anytime soon. The question is, can they do at least enough this season to maybe prolong that inevitability? For the Minnesota Timberwolves, my question is, can they keep the momentum rolling? They made 2 Western Conference Finals now in back-to-back years after only making 1 in previous franchise history. That is a massive uptick in success and competency. Can they keep that going? Because last year it didn't feel like they were going to make it back, but they proved a lot of people wrong. Now I don't really see anybody picking them to make the conference finals again. I think everybody's like, yeah, it'll be some combo of the Thunder, the Nuggets, or the Rockets, or maybe you'll see a Lakers or a Clippers believer. There are a few Wolves believers for sure, but it feels like people are doubting them once again, and they did lose Nikola Jokic. I worry about the point guard play of Mike Conley, although Ant could take a jump, and Randall was really impressive last season down the stretch and in the playoffs. I think this team is capable of making it back there, but it does feel like there's also a world where they take a bit of a step back and they have to reevaluate some things going into the following season. For the New Orleans Pelicans, my question is, what is the direction with this team? Because we talked about it a little bit with the Bulls earlier, but I feel even more confused by New Orleans because they went a bit younger. They drafted 2 guys in Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen. They traded away CJ McCollum for Jordan Poole. I think that's a good direction to go. But also, they trade away their own first-round pick, or the swap that is between them and the Bucks next season, to move up and get Derek Queen, and they were terrible this year, and they're super injury-prone, and I just don't think on paper this roster is very good. I don't think this is a playoff team. I definitely don't think this is a playoff team, a top 6, 7, 8 team in the Western Conference. If they make the play-in and push in through there, then maybe, but do we really trust Zion to be healthy? I don't, and I don't think any of their bigs really play well off of Zion Williamson. To me, it still feels like they need to reset. I don't think they're going to find any success with Zion. I think this era is cooked. I didn't like the DeJounte Murray trade. I felt like they've mismanaged a lot of moments. They've dealt with a lot of injuries. They didn't get a lot back for Brandon Ingram. The Pelicans need to reset, in my opinion. But I think because they trade their first-round pick, they don't plan on doing that anytime soon. I just think they're trying to turn something that isn't going to lead to any success into success, and it's going to put them in a much bigger hole than they should be in otherwise. For the New York Knicks, my question is there enough there defensively? That was a big issue for them last season with Jalen Brunson and Cat, their 2 best players, both being negative defenders. Like, you have great defense from OG Anunoby, and Mikal is solid, albeit not where he once was. Josh Hart is solid at times, gives a lot of effort, but he's not this high caliber defender. You still do have Deuce McBride, and I think Yabu's going to help a little bit. Jordan Clarkson, not so much. Like, there does feel like there is reason to be somewhat optimistic about them defensively, and maybe part of that comes from them going a little bit more towards that double big or starting Deuce McBride instead of Josh Hart, both things that I think I would lean towards if I was the head coach of the Knicks. But it still feels like if they go up against a Cleveland in the playoffs, I worry a lot about that high-powered offense against a Knicks defense that I still project to be kind of porous. Like, if they want to win the Eastern Conference like they have a chance to do, I still think they might need to upgrade defensively, personnel-wise. For my favorite team, the Oklahoma City Thunder, my question is the shooting going to be enough? Last year, the Thunder won the championship despite a pretty down run when it came to the three-point shot. And part of that was because, Chet Holmgren coming off a hip injury and Jalen Williams dealing with that hand injury. I think those two guys will be a lot better shooting the basketball, but there are also some ups and downs for some of the role players. And with a deeper Western Conference now, with a more talented West overall, I think the Thunder are going to need to shoot a little bit better next season to beat the new Denver Nuggets and the Houston Rockets in the playoffs. So maybe the Thunder have to go out there and add a little bit more shooting. Maybe guys are just more consistent, but I do think the three-point shooting is like one of the only question marks when it comes to this loaded Thunder team. For the Orlando Magic, while we're on the topic of shooting, is their shooting going to be improved enough for them to be a legit threat in the Eastern Conference? Because that is the big pain point for them. They were one of the worst outside shooting teams in the entire sport last season. They did bring in Desmond Bane, Tyus Jones, pretty solid outside shooter last season. Jalen Suggs coming back from injury, he should help out a little bit on that end. Like, they are going to be, I think, better, but is that enough? Because Franz is an abysmal three-point shooter. Like, he's got to be better. If he could be at least average, that would give them such a massive uptick on offense. Paolo started off the season shooting really well from the outside, but when he came back from injury, it tailed off a good bit. He needs to be a bit more consistent. I do trust it's going to be better, but for them to make a run to the Eastern Conference Finals or even the NBA Finals, if they really want to go ahead and put it all together, I still think they might need to add a little bit more outside shooting from across the league. For the Philadelphia 76ers, my question is it over for Joel Embiid? Have we seen the last of him at MVP level? And I really, really hope this isn't the case, because last time we saw Embiid somewhat healthy, he was out there putting up 36 points a night. And I still do believe he has all-star, all-NBA caliber play in him. But is that going to be enough to help the Sixers be a lot better this season? Because I am a believer in them. I think they could be one of the better teams in the East if they keep guys on the court. But obviously that is a massive what if. And even if guys are healthy, if Embiid isn't playing at an elite level, it probably doesn't matter, and their hopes of making any sustained playoff run are completely dashed. Again, I'm hoping it's not the case. I'm going to believe that Embiid can bounce back in a big way, but with all the injuries, the toll that those have taken on him, there's a chance we've seen the last of MVP Embiid. For the Suns, the question is, much like with Brooklyn, who is part of their next era? Because they're restarting now. They dealt away Kevin Durant. Bradley Beal got cut. Still, Devin Booker feels like he's probably here for the long haul, doesn't really want to leave, so he's set in stone. But outside of him, is Jalen Green going to be his backcourt mate of the future, or is he a swing and miss? Who's going to be the starting big of the future? Is it Malawach, or is it Mark Williams? What does Nick Richards play into things? What happens with Oso Ighodaro and Ryan Dunn and Rasheer Fleming? They've got now an interesting group of young talent. I'm sure we could still see a world where Dylan Brooks is dealt away, or Grayson Allen, to bring in more young pieces. It's going to be a lot of moving parts over the next few years for Phoenix, trying to get back to relevancy, and I'm excited to see what comes out of it. For the Blazers, my question is, how much are they about to commit to competing? Because by adding Drew Holiday and re-signing Dame this offseason, and I believe Joe Cronin even said it, they are making an active push towards being a more competitive basketball team. And they've got a good framework in place to try and do that with Denny Avdija and Shaedon Sharpe and Donovan Clingan and Tumudi Kamara. They've got this great defense. They made a pretty good run at the end of last season trying to push for the play-in, but how far are they willing to go in that direction? Would they consider, if Scoot Henderson is disappointing next season, trading him away? Would they consider trading Shaedon Sharpe for an upgrade, a more veteran scorer, if they felt like he wasn't producing enough next season? I'm just interested to know, how all in are they trying to go within the next couple of seasons? Or is this kind of just a semi, hey, we're going to be more competitive before trying to make a big splash still a couple years down the line after more young talent develops? For the Kings, my only question is, when is this getting blown up? I feel like it's only a matter of time and that they're just putting it off because they don't want to go back down towards the bottom of the standings after only 1 year being back in the playoffs, but it's the best thing for them long term. It's clear this thing isn't going to work. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team this season. They can't really shoot. They can't really defend. The pieces, the main guys with Sabonis, DeRozan, LaVine don't work as a trio. They've just got to make some moves. Maybe you don't have to trade everybody away. You can kind of reshape this a little bit, but there's no reason they should be going to this upcoming season still with the roster intact the way that it is. And now the report is that the one guy they're considering trading still is like a Malik Monk, who I think they need on this roster as an athlete and as a shooter and a bit of a playmaker because they still don't have great lead guard play. I have no idea what the Kings are doing. Please blow this up. On the other end of the spectrum for the San Antonio Spurs, my question is, do they get aggressive again? Because they traded for De'Aaron Fox at last year's deadline in what was an aggressive move. And, you know, he and Wemby didn't get to play a lot last season because Wemby, of course, missed the back half of the year and De'Aaron Fox dealt with a finger injury. But now they're going to have a full season together. The Spurs have a war chest of assets, matching contracts, picks. They can make a massive splash basically whenever they wanted if someone they like becomes available. So if around the deadline a few names pop up, how aggressive do they get? How much are they willing to kind of just take it easy, see how the young guys develop? You know, Stephon Castle, is that a guy they'd be willing to move, or like a Dylan Harper? I think probably more likely they want to keep Harper than Stephon Castle if I had to guess, but maybe both of them are untouchable at this point. I don't know. I feel like the Spurs are in a position to be aggressive if someone becomes available, and I wonder if they would make a big time swing if that type of guy was present at the deadline. For the Raptors, my question is, what does this even look like? It is such an interesting and weird conglomerate of young talent that's being paid a lot of money over there in Toronto. Like, on paper, you can be kind of excited about this team, but I don't know how well they're going to shoot. We haven't seen it play together like at all because Quickly dealt with a lot of injury last year, and Brandon Ingram didn't play whatsoever for the team because he came in at the deadline but was dealing with injury himself. I don't know how he fits next to Scotty Barnes and RJ Barrett and Jakob Poeltl. Like, is there at all enough shooting in that lineup? Is Emmanuel Quickly ever going to be healthy? I don't know who's going to be on the court on a nightly basis for them, what it looks like when they all are out there, and what the pivot is if this team is disappointing and not very good because they're paying all these guys a ton of money. It is just such a weird and interesting situation that I might have to make a full video on at some point this offseason. For the Jazz, much like Brooklyn and Phoenix, the question is, what is their core going forward? Because even though they've been at this a little bit longer than those other teams, they probably should have figured this out. They really haven't, or at least it doesn't feel like it. Don't know who like your lead guard is of the future yet, whether Isaiah Collier, Keontae George, and Walter Clayton all in the mix. You have some interesting wing and forward options with Ace Bailey. Feels like he's pretty much a lock. Cody Williams had a pretty good summer league. Can he build off of that? Taylor Hendricks dealt with a massive injury last season, but I still like him as a piece going forward. You still have Walker Kessler, but it feels like Kyle Filipowski was really good in summer league, and maybe he's the long-term fit. Lauri Markkanen is still here, and he was disappointing. Is he still a long-term guy for you? Yusuf Nurkic is here for some reason. Bryce Sensabaugh, like, there are just so many names that are in the mix, it feels like, to be starters or second string guys, or even fall deep down into the rotation depending on performance this season. I've got no idea who ends up coming out of this as like the core of the future for the Jazz, but I think this season is a big one for deciding that. And finally, for the Washington Wizards, my question is, what's the move with the veterans? Because they've got some on the roster. Now, they already moved off of Marcus Smart, so that clears things up a little bit, but specifically, like, they've got CJ McCollum and Chris Middleton. When do they move off of those guys? Do they keep both of them for next season and just have them be veteran leaders? Do they hold on to them around the deadline, hope they can put up some value, and then deal them away? Do they take them through to the end of the season and then decide there? I don't know. Feels like there are a lot of options, a lot of ways the Wizards can go with those players. If I had to pick one that's most likely, I'd say probably wait until the deadline and then see if a team is willing to buy on those guys. And if they can rehabilitate some of their trade value, that could be a great move. It feels very Oklahoma City-esque, which some of the leadership over there in Washington came from the Thunder, so that would make sense. But yeah, just interested to see what happens because it does still feel weird that CJ McCollum and Chris Middleton are Washington Wizards. And with that being said, that is my question for every single NBA team going into next season. Like I said earlier in the video, let me know what your answer is to the question that I put out there for your favorite team, or if there's a different question that you're more interested in for this season. Leave a like, subscribe if you enjoyed, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. I appreciate you watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, stay back.